verses 24 and 25. Verse 24, fire, light, day, the bright, half of the month, the 6 months of the northern path of the sun. Then going forth, the men who know the absolute go to the absolute. Verse 25, smoke, night, so also dark, half of the month, the 6 months of the southern part of the sun. Then going forth, the yogi obtains the lunar light and returns. So verses 24 and 25. Let us see the interpretations of the words of these verses. The first path is that of light, fire, day, the bright, the 6 months on northern path of the sun. The word tatra is used, meaning at that time. The phrase Brahma Vidyo Jana is used, meaning yogi who is knower of Brahman. The knower of Brahman who goes on this path at that time attains Brahman. Guruji says it in simple language, that if at the bright half of the month, during the 6 months on the northern path of the sun, at the time of the day when the flame of fire is radiating light, the knower of the Brahman leaves his body, then he attains Brahman straight away. This is one path. In the same way, if one wishes to get to the meaning of the 25th verse, then the path on which there is smoke, night, so also the dark half of the month, and the 6 months of the southern path, on that path the yogi obtains the lunar light from the moon and returns. Such a yogi departs at the time of smoke, night, so also the dark, and the 6 months of the southern part, when the yagna of fire has become calm and returns. So verse 24 basically is in relation to the first part that we discussed in verse 23, and that is about the Brahman, attaining Brahman, or attaining absolute with God. And 25 is basically the yogi coming back and returning, and that deals with the second path. So there are 7 verses of the Gita, and out of these some verses are such that people have misunderstood them so much, and so many misconceptions have arisen from these verses. If you wish to make a list out of these verses, then these 2 verses will come first in that list. Remember the example of Bhishma in the Mahabharata, where Bhishma was waiting for the 6 months of the northern path of the sun, and he told Arjuna and Krishna, who had come, that it is the 6 months of the northern path, that it was now time for him to depart. This is because Bhishma had a boon that everybody else goes and does not have any control over their departure. But Bhishma had control that he could depart when he chooses. Even though his body did not have power or anything else, when he was resting on a bed of arrows, Bhishma only left his body when the 6 months of the northern path came. At that time we say, wow, and we quote this verse from the Gita, Shamasa Uttarayam, the bright half of the month, the 6 months of the northern path of the sun. A very big misunderstanding has arisen here. Guruji says that one thing clearly from the beginning, that in the 2 verses that are 24th and 25th verses, that if one just sticks to the direct meaning of the words, then a lot of difficulties will be created. So many questions will arise, which basically lead to a number of answers to which you will not be able to give, and even Guruji is not able to give. And even the wisest person in the world will not be able to give, no matter who you go to. You have to understand the abstract meaning of these verses. That is why Guruji has clearly said that the meaning of the word kal here is the path rather than time. Sri Krishna is saying that those are 2 ways and not that these are 2 times. This is not a description of 2 times, but a description of 2 paths. This is something we must make clear. One is the path of light, and the other is a path of darkness. So verse 24 is the path of light, and verse 25 is the path of darkness. One is the path of fire, and the other is the path of smoke. Otherwise, it can also happen that you will see many yogis in the history of the world would have left their bodies at the time of night, and so many materialistic people have left their bodies during the 6 months of the northern path, or the part of the light. The northern path is there for 6 months, and many people die in these 6 months. If a person passes away during the 6 months of the northern path of the sun, then does that mean that the person immediately attains supreme abode? Of course not. We have to understand the abstract meaning of these two verses. There is the path of light described in the 24th verse, and in the 25th verse the path of darkness has been described. We have to understand all these symbols. First of all, Agni, which is fire, is described. Srimad Adi Shankaraji says that Agni, fire, is a deity presiding over time. Therefore, one who has won over time and who has gone beyond time goes on the path of fire. One who has made good use of his time goes on the path of fire. This is a person who has made good use of moments that the Supreme Soul has given him in this life. Such a person does not return. Keep writing behind each and every one of these that the person does not return and that the person attains Brahman. The second meaning of fire is a leader. Agne na yasu patre asman vishwadvam veva devani vidvan. Fire is the leader. Ravi Shankar Maharaj says in his commentary, Gita Bhadvani, that if a person lives their lives according to the leadership of a pure person, such as a saint, a wise person, or a knowledgeable person, or a Guruji, then he does not have to return again. It is natural that when we go ourselves, then a trial and error method comes, where if we have made a mistake, then we do something else. But if we live our lives under the leadership of a wise person who knows life, then we do not have to return again. All the items mentioned in verse 24, such as fire, light, day, the bright, and the 6 months of the northern path of the sun, are all representative of light. We can get a simple meaning from this, that if one has gone on their journey at the time of light, then no obstacles come. The journey becomes completely straightforward and one can reach their goal. Therefore, the path in the 24th verse is the path of light. There is even a meaning behind when the months of the northern path of the sun are mentioned. The everyday meaning is that in the months of the northern path of the sun, there is no rain. And if you go to the region near the Himalayas, then the snow has fallen away from the path, and therefore the path becomes straightforward, so that one can go straight through. The path becomes straightforward at the time of the month of the northern path of the sun. And if we look at it according to its spiritual meaning, then the word used for the months of the northern path is Uttarayanam, which is the northern path of the sun. If we split the word Uttarayanam, then Ayanam means movement or direction, and Uttara literally translates as north. But if we split this word, then Ut means upwards, as in Uttam being the greatest, and Tara means more. Therefore, Uttara means even more upwards. Such a movement even more upwards is Uttarayanam, and one who goes on the path never returns back to the world. Such an upward movement can only take place in light. What is our goal? Sri Krishna has described it in the previous verses as Paramdham, the supreme abode. Therefore, those who have substance of light, those who have the instrument of light, and over there a torch will not work, and those who have light within those people can move towards supreme abode. And saints explain that this type of light, what this type of light is. So Pandit Sripad Damodar Sikadaji has given a very beautiful description that this light is that of Sadguru, or the Holy Guru. A Sadguru is a giver of light and radiance like that from fire. He is a field of light. The light in the form of Gyan, or wisdom, from him gives guidance to the seeker. While one has the help of Sadguru, That time is the day of the seeker in the field of spirituality. This is fire, and this is the path of day. At that time, the seeker will get guidance. And the 6 months of the northern path of the sun is the feeling of making efforts for others. This is upwards movement. This is the feeling of doing good to others. This is the 6 months of the northern path of the sun. One who, in the time that they have given, performs activities for the good of others, makes efforts for others, and does your activities, then this is the 6 months of the northern path. Remember that in the 3rd verse of this 8th chapter, Shri Krishna said, Bhuto bhavan bhavakaro, visagra karma smitna. Karma is the name given to efforts made to develop the lives of all creatures and to take them towards the light. So efforts to take the lives of all creatures upwards is karma. The same thing is said here about the 6 months of the northern path of the sun. That one who has done activities in their lives for the good of others, their upward movement is certain. Those who have performed activities for selfish purposes will return back. One should perform the work of service. The sun is an agent for the intellect. This verse therefore refers to a person whose intellect has remained radiant up to the very end. We say in Gujarati that Satya Buddhi Nath. The intellect begins to stop working when a person gets to a certain age. But a person whose intellect remains radiant until the very end, and one who has therefore made their intellect detached, has looked after their intellect, and has nourished their intellect. For such a person, their intellect is radiant until the very last moment, and such a person moves upwards. This is a person whose intellect does not go in the wrong direction. What is the bright half of the month? The right half of the month is the pure side. What side are you on? One should ask themselves in life that, whose side am I on, and on what side am I on? Am I on the pure side, or am I on the impure side? Am I on the bright half of the month, or am I on the dark half of the month? The word Krishna has used does not mean the Bhagavan Krishna here, but the dark half of the month. Whose side am I on? One should always keep thinking about this. On what side is the power, the wealth, wisdom and time in your life being used for? Is it being used under bright light or for the good activities, or is it being used under the dark for bad activities? Guruji wrote once that the power has come, but what side is it being used for? One who stays in the light of a Sadguru or a wise person always stays in the bright. This is because a guru is constantly checking whether your power is being used in the right way and in the right path, and whether the power of wisdom that God has given you is being used in the right way and on the right path. A wise person who walks on this path of light attains Brahman. Day is again used as a symbol for activity. You will see around the world that when the day begins and the sun rises, then all the activities begin. And when the sun sets, it is night time, then everyone begins to go back to peace. So the day is a representative for activity. One who has remained active until the last moment of his life, for such a person, and the possibility of moving upwards is much greater. This is the person who has remained active until the last moment of his life with the body and with the mind. Many times it so happens that the body is not working, but the person is active with the mind. Such a person moves upwards. Guruji has heard many people saying, and you will also have heard many people saying, that if you walk around and move and take this as God, then it is all very good. Those who are active move upwards. This is a very good wish. Near Murti Rande used to say that if I'm doing such an activity, such as writing, reading, performing bhakti, or any other good activity, then if I die while doing this, I shall be fortunate. This is a symbol for day. A person who, up until their last breath, is working with hands, their feet and body working, has their intellect working, is performing activities of service and doing good to others, and not only that, but because the fire is a symbol for renunciation, as their attachment finishes, they are still working. This is because a person has attachment, they can still carry on working right up until the very end. But this person performs works without attachment. When a person dies like this, then consider that such an individual has become amalgamated with Brahman. This is the true meaning of the 24th verse. Many people hold on to the words of this verse saying that death should only be during the 6 months of the northern path of the sun. The 25th verse speaks about the path of smoke, night, the dark, half of the moon, and the 6 months of the southern part of the sun. One who goes on this path and passes away on this path, such a yogi obtains the lunar light and turns. This means that at the time of the 6 months of the southern part, the dark and night time of the fire of yajna is not alight, so that there is now smoke. When a karma yogi, a yogi on path of action, leaves his body at that time, then he obtains the lunar light and returns. Such a person is to obtain a rebirth again. This is called the path of smoke. If we make efforts to understand the spiritual meaning of this, then smoke, night, the dark, and the 6 months of the southern path, all of these words are symbol of darkness. They are representing darkness. We saw earlier that if a person goes on his journey at the time of light, then the path of his journey becomes straightforward. He reaches his destination very quickly. But if a person goes on his journey at the time of darkness, then he cannot see the path very clearly. He meets obstacles, has difficulties, and he cannot find a destination, so he turns back again. He does not attain his goal, and this is why he has to turn back again. We saw that earlier in the 6 months of the northern path. There is no rain, and the ice has fallen away in places with tall mountain peaks, and therefore the path is quite straightforward. On the other hand, in the period of darkness, in the 6 months of the southern part, a lot of rain is falling, and that is why it becomes even more difficult to travel. If we look at it from a spiritual meaning, then the 6 months of the northern path of the sun is the path of wisdom, whereas the 6 months on the southern path is the path of ignorance. Even if a wise person gets sorrows and difficulties, he still knows the path of attaining liberation. He becomes liberated from his sorrows. He does let sorrows touch his inner being, and he becomes liberated. On the other hand, what happens with an ignorant person is that sorrows keep coming one after another, just like the waves of an ocean, and this continuation remains. This is the 6 months of the sun path of the sun. Scriptures and thinkers say that smoke is a symbol for falsity, delusion, and illusion. One cannot see the path in this. This is when a curtain of illusion has been put in front of a person's eyes. And because there is an illusion, one cannot understand what is clear and cannot see it. That is why one cannot reach until the very end of the path. That is why one has to turn back and return. Ravi Shankar Maharaj says it very clearly in his simple language that smoke is when someone's heart is filled with dirt, and how can such a person reach the Supreme Soul? And on this path of smoke, how does the individual move? It is described in our scriptures that such an individual going through the path of smoke has the devs or the gods residing in the smoke, helping the individual go beyond their territory. The gods residing in the smoke help him go beyond the borders of their territory. And when night time comes, then the gods residing in smoke and this responsibility of gods that resides in night time. If Guruji was to say in simple language that these are the territories of the devs, each and every dev has a territory. Therefore, when death happens, then immediately the gods residing in the smoke take this individual outside their territory and hand him to the gods residing at night. The gods residing at night take him on a journey around, and when the individual becomes docile, then they take the individual beyond the borders of their time and their territory and hand him to the gods of the dark. Of course, the field of the dark is an even greater field if we were to look at it in terms of the meaning of both space and time. Then the gods of the territory of dark take the individual beyond their borders and hand the individual to the gods of the 6 months of the southern part of the sun, so the gods of light. And the gods of the 6 months of the southern part take this individual to the Chandralok, or the realm of the moon, the Svargalok, or the heaven, or any other realms that are temporary. And this individual enjoys the material pleasures of heaven, according to the karmas he has accumulated, and he has already been described. He uses up his punyas, or the opposite of sins, in the Chandralok, and enjoys, and once again enjoys these. So that is why it is said here that the yogi obtains lunar light and returns back. But what is this night? Rama Yitri Sa Ratri. That is the place where people are played is night time. Rat, of course, means the time of night, but the symbolic meaning of it is that place where people are played. This is the darkness of ignorance where people are played. This means that after enjoying material enjoyments, they become enjoyers of disease. This is night according to its spiritual meaning. Those individuals who are affected by enjoyments and diseases go to the impure side of the dark. We saw earlier that we should ask which side we are on. Are we on the bright side and the side of light, or are we on the dark side or the side of darkness? Therefore, those individuals who are affected by enjoyments, diseases in the end, go to the dark side. This is because they only see enjoyments in that, and they become played by that, and therefore they go to that side. The people who have fallen to that side neither can decide their own goals, nor can they decide their own paths, nor can they accept the refuge of the Holy Guru. On the bright half of the moon and on the path of light, there was listening to the Sadguru, the Holy Guru. The light of Sadguru and the light of Gyan, or wisdom. Over here on the dark side, there is no light to oneself. There is no readiness to listen to the Holy Guru. And that is why in this darkness, the individual attains destruction after bumping and getting hits and getting sorrows. This is the dark half of the moon. The light and radiance of the moon decreases. In the same way, one who goes on the path of darkness has the balance of their punya reduced. That is why this is called the path of the dark. The person has gathered punya while staying on the earth, and when he goes on this path of darkness, then he certainly enjoys the material enjoyments from his development, but in this he keeps reducing his punya. On the bright side of the moon, he has gathered light for 15 days, and now on the dark, the moon keeps losing that light. In the same way, the individual soul who has gathered the punyas by staying on this earth and going on this path, he gets to enjoy the material enjoyments. He gets pleasures, he attains heaven, and goes into the realm of the moon. But what happens as a consequence is that his punya keeps reducing. That is why this is the path of the dark. And when one's punya decreases and one's punya are destroyed, then one has to return back. Then going forth, the yogi obtains the lunar light and returns. What light is this? It is the light of the moon. After getting hit around in the dark, or after being played by material enjoyments, this individual soul at some time sees some light. But that light is not the light of the self-lighting, or the sun, or Aditya, but of the temporary lit moon. Not only that, but in the Puranas that it is described that the moon is very materialistic. Why does the moon keep deteriorating? We get very interesting stories to read. The moon was extremely materialistic, And it is true that bhog roga bhayan, material enjoyments lead to a fear of disease. When material enjoyments come, then diseases are going to come of any type. If a person enjoys the material pleasure of eating too much, then diseases will come. Diseases of every type can come. There are diseases in material enjoyments. This is the principle. The moon enjoyed excessive material enjoyments, and that is why it caught a disease and began deteriorating. It became morbid. Then it served foods and other healing plants, and therefore some of its radiance was preserved. He therefore has a light during temporary phases. While it serves healing plants, then you can see its radiance, but then it can deteriorate again. Then once again it gets the sun's light, and once again starts to radiate. This is a symbolic thing, but this moon has light in temporary phases. This is because it only has temporary light, and it has remained excessively materialistic. It is always deteriorating and always reducing. The poor moon gets its light from the sun, so how much light can it actually give to others? How can that which itself is dependent upon others for light give light to others? This light from a dependent and temporary source is limited. Half of the moon's life is spent deteriorating. Is there any light left after the 15 days while the moon is lit? That is why the moon cannot become a giver of guidance. People on the path of smoke try to get some guidance from the moon. If it is a dark night and you are leaving to pass through a jungle using the light of the moon, then that is fine, because you will get some guidance. But the fear of being struck by thorns does not go away, and there is no guarantee that violent animals will not come and attack you. There is no guarantee of this. All these difficulties are going to stay there with the moon. That is why those who obtain the lunar night from the moon have to return back. There is one word here that we should try to understand in this verse, which is yogi. Why is the word yogi used here? Ramanujacharya says that the word yogi here means a person performing karmas that incur punya. This is not the yogi who is the ideal of the Gita, as defined in the 50th verse of the 2nd chapter of the Gita, which states, Yoga karamasu kausalam. Therefore strive for yoga. Yoga is excellence in action. This is also not the yogi that is the ideal of the Gita as defined in the 48th verse of the 2nd chapter of the Gita. Samadvan yoga uchyate. Evenness of mind is called yoga. This is not yogi in that meaning. This is not the yogi that is the peak state of the Gita. But it is certainly a yogi going towards the peak state. This is a person who is developing in life. When Guruji writes about the path of smoke, there are no worries should be thinking about this person goes to hell. It's not the yogi going to hell. There is a reason behind the person being called a yogi. This yogi performs karmas with desire. There are reasons for this. First of all, in the Gita, God describes 3 different paths for individuals. Does anyone know what those 3 paths are? So, the one thing should be clear, that the path of brightness and dark halves of the moon are described, but they are both great paths. So it's not as if that the verse 24 path, which is the path of brightness, is a great path, and verse 25 is not a great path. Both of these paths that are described in verse 24 and 25 are both great. No ordinary people, as Guruji says, are involved here. When God describes later, for example, in the 14th chapter of the Gita, then in the 18th chapter, the 14th verse, God will clearly state that there are 3 paths for individuals. Those who are established in goodness rise upwards, the passionate remain in the middle, and the dull, steeped in the lower occurrences of the modes, sink downwards. So in the 3 modes of nature, or goodness, so sattva, goodness, rajas, passion, and tamas, dullness. They're all described in the 14th chapter. And God says that all individuals can be divided into these three modes of nature. So goodness, passion, and dullness. Each and every person in the world can be divided into these three modes. In that verse, God described three paths. Those of the path of goodness rise upwards. Those of the path of rajas or passion remain in the middle. And those of the path of dullness are steeped in the lower occurrences. So those with a violent attitude and violent qualities, such people in the mode of dullness or tamas, they attain destruction. The yogi described in this verse may attain the path of the moon and may attain the path of smoke, but at least it is a higher level than that of human beings. And that's why he's gone of the middle regions. He has explained that he has gone above the lower occurrences and is at a higher level. And that is why he is called a yogi. Second, in order to successfully attain the Chandalok, or the region of the moon, or heaven, he must have accepted some control amongst the abundance of material enjoyments in the world. He must have announced that the material enjoyments of this world and must have renounced them with control. That is why he is called a yogi, and that is why he has attained a right to heaven. Why does everyone not reach heaven? He may come back, but at least for a little while he stayed in heaven. Guruji wanted to write something in simple language in relation to the following verse that he mentioned in the 6th chapter of the Gita. Krishna Punya Martya Lokam Vishanti. They enter to the world of mortals when their merit is exhausted. So let's say a person who is earning a salary of 10,000 rupees a month. Out of this he keeps 1,000 rupees, 1,500 or 2,000 rupees every month. At the end of the year, all the savings he has gathered, the 15,000 rupees or whatever that he's gathered, is used by him to take his family to a holiday, to a hill station. When he goes to the hill station for that holiday, then you only can see him enjoy himself there, and he does not worry about anything else. He's on a holiday. He does not need to wake up in the morning to catch the 7 o'clock train. He doesn't have to listen to his boss. He has no other worries. He's on basically on a holiday, enjoying himself happily at peace. Now, all his savings have nearly been used all up. And he tells his wife that her purse is about to become empty. And she says that, come on, let's get back to the 9-to-5 job. This has happened. This is all fine. In the same way, all the punyas that he has gathered up in his life, he puts that balance of the punya in his purse and goes to heaven. And when all his punyas are spent because of heaven, he then, as Guru states, he says, Tetam bhuktva svarlogam vishlam, Krishna punya matikam vishanti. Having enjoyed the spacious world of heaven, they return to the world of mortals when their merit is exhausted. So once their punyas are exhausted, they come back. So they go to heaven, and this is fine, but it is a big cycle that no matter if in a year you are saving 12,000 rupees every month, and at the end of the year you go to on your extravagant holiday for a number of days, in the same way there is a large population of people who do not even talk about going on holidays. This is because they're only able to make their ends meet, and they cannot save the money or even afford to travel. And therefore, the person who goes on holiday, is he going to be happier or less happier? He's of course going to be happier. In the same way, those people who rise upwards are greater than those people who are in the middle regions or are steeped in the lower occurrences. And that is why Sri Krishna uses the word yogi for these people. At least they have gathered that much punya in order to go upwards. The third reason why they're called yogis is that in reality their intention is to attain the Lord, the supreme abode, as we mentioned. Let us understand one thing very clear in the field of Dharma, that those people who have come here and who are in reality making efforts with their hearts, they have felt like they wish to attain the truth. Only then can they come here. Otherwise, they will not come there, and why would they come there? If a person goes into any other field, be it in the field of wealth, politics, science, or whatever, and there is some difficulty, or there's others that bring them there, then if a person is sitting in the office in order to do a job, then does he do it in order so he can enjoy himself? No. There are many people like this. Let's ignore the 5% of people who get job satisfaction and who are basically going into work with happiness. The 95% of people do their jobs because they have to do them. People are living in a material world. But how many people actually feel that we are enjoying doing the things in the material world? It is because there is nobody to look after them at 9 p.m. or 9:30 p.m. at night when they have to go home that they go there. When they comb, they have to look after their wife, otherwise they have no other way of living their lives. What Guruji means to say is that we are in the field that we are in, and that the way we are in it because we are condemned to do it. We are condemned to do what we have to do. We have no other route and no other path, and that is why we are doing it. But the person who comes into the field of Dharma has come there with his own conviction. No one is forcing him to do anything. Those who have blind faith or venom are not dharmic, and Guruji is not ready to accept them as dharmic. Those who have come to attain the satya, or the truth, and those who come in search of the truth, they have come there not by condemnation, but they have come there by choice. They have chosen it. They get some bliss from it, and they see something great. That is why they have come. Otherwise, why would they have come? What use is it for them to come? The whole society is about eat, drink and be merry, making Diwali sweets, celebrating Diwali, etc. What will happen after they eat them for 3 days? Those people who come to Dharma with a goal, and those people were to come to Dharma with love, such people are truly dharmic. Such a yogi described in this verse as well rises upward, may attain the path of smoke, but he has walked on that path. He has performed penances. He has attained something at the time and has made some efforts. And then let us say that something like this happens, where at the time of death, some subtle material vasana or mental impression has remained, or some wish for mature enjoyments has remained. Then as a consequence at the time of death, his mind becomes fickle and goes into material enjoyments. And that is why he has attained this path. But if this has happened for 1 or 2 moments, then this does not mean that all his penances go away. Shri Krishna said in the 6th chapter of the one's karmas do not perish like a rent crowd that comes out and yet does not shower forth rain. Shri Krishna said in the 40th verse of the 6th chapter that Nahi kalyakart kashid durgatam tata gachati. For never does anyone who does good, dear friend, tread the path of woe. He promised that if a person has done even a little bit of good, or has done even a little bit of good activities, then he has not attained downward movement, because his upward movement is certain. The yogi described in this verse has performed good efforts throughout his life, with his heart and with conviction. God has said earlier in this verse that it is a rule that one moves in the direction of what one remembers at the time of their death. Therefore, it is possible that at the time of death, some vasana remained with him. He may have had an imagination or thought of the material enjoyment at the time of death. But God is kind enough. He is so full of compassion that he says that you still have mature enjoyments left to enjoy. He is so full of compassion that he says you will have mature enjoyments left to enjoy. You still have subtle vasana. Why should you need to enjoy these mature enjoyments on the earth? Let me take you upwards. And those who have wishes for material enjoyments have them fulfilled in heaven, or on the realm of the moon, and after enjoying them, they make efforts again. Shri Krishna called this yoga bhrashta, a person who has fallen away from yoga, in the 6th chapter of the Gita. Such an individual is still a yogi. This is what such an individual soul is like, and that is why what the Supreme Soul sees is that the act should be in this person's heart is great, and his wishes are great. He slipped a little, but it does not matter. Why should this matter? Because God immediately gives him a chance, gives him an opportunity, and that is why he is called a yogi. God is accepting him as a yogi. That is why one should not think that only the first part described in these 2 verses is great and the second is inferior. It is not like that at all. Both of these parts are great. That is what is meant to be, this is what these verses mean. And these are the only 2 parts in the world. God explains that in the next verse, which is verse 26.